think of the event? Oh, it's awesome. I mean, it's like the Super Bowl of street car, race cars, and the big power cars, you know? It's not just quick cars, it's fast cars, which is a big difference.
We love this event. Only events we ever go to where you actually get a reward for winning versus, you know, I guess the trophy's always cool, but getting money in the end is also really cool too, and that's what puts this event different than everywhere else, is you don't ever get that, and that's awesome.
Mac Butler, 2010 Nissan GTR, and it was supposed to be a daily driver. I haven't dynoed it when it's all the way turned up, but the kit should make anywhere from 16 to 1750 probably on a Hero type pull, so it probably runs around 1650, something like that.
215.93 miles an hour, gotta like that.
There's a lot of GTRs here because they do well just being tuned. You know, a lot of people, if they're smart, they stick to an FBO car, which is full bolt-ons. In a half-mile event, traction is kind of king, so it's hard to get the cars going down the runways, and so that's why you see a lot of the big cars, whether it's a UGR Lambo or a GTR, they're all-wheel drive, so they do real well in half-mile type events.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be at least 20, 25 GTRs here minimum, and there's a lot of them above the 170, 180 range. It's easy to make a GTR fast. It's a better engine than a 2J. You could probably piss some people off there, but it will make more power. Until you get above a certain power, they're pretty easy to drive. I mean, a 650 horse GTR will go like 155, 160 all day, and when you look at your sheet there, you're gonna see there's probably a ton of cars between 145 and 170. I think it's just an easy car, an easy platform, and growing platform still, and they're just easy to make power. They're pretty reliable at high power compared to like most other cars. I drive a sweet 1994 Acura Integra. That 203 pass was probably somewhere in the range of like about 1100 wheel. I currently hold the front wheel drive record in the half mile at 208. Really, 210 is kind of my goal this year, but secretly deep down I want to go 215. Aerodynamics play a huge factor after 150, 160. This is thanks to Gorilla Tape. Oddly enough, it's worth about 2 miles an hour because the 94 Integras have like the indents in when the 98 and above have flush headlights. I tested it here many years ago and it was worth like 2 miles an hour, so I always do it. It's kind of the signature of the front of the car too. It's a fine line between both. You want to reduce drag, but if you need traction, downforce helps. You don't want to, there's a fine line.
I do not have any aero mods on the car. You know, if you take the wing off the back, people are getting 1 to 2 more miles an hour out of them, but it takes away from some of the stability on high speed. So for anything you take away, you may get more slippery, but you also lose some stability on the top end. But I was talking to Miles and he said they were actually doing some real world testing where the car was going exactly 210, 210, 210. They took the wing off, put the aero on, they went 211 or 212. So there is a little bit to be gained, but I do know that they do get a little bit more squirrely on the top end.
My name is Zack Morgan. I drive the PRE Racing Black Widow WRX. It's a 2005 WRX, basically 1130 wheel WRX. It's the fastest half-mile Subaru in the world. We do two things. We want to reduce drag as much as possible, but also, especially a sedan like this is really aerodynamically poor from the factory, so it'd get really light in the back if we didn't do things like a rear spoiler and a diffuser to keep the back of the car on the ground during the braking portion mostly. It goes straight fine on power, but when you lift, the car would move around a lot, and even at about 177 to 79 miles an hour is where we started to experience that and really started putting more aerodynamics on the car. So it's very stable even at 200 miles an hour. So half mile is kind of unique because, you know, quarter mile drag racing is almost all about the lightest vehicle weight possible and the highest amount of power. the half mile kind of blends the two, where you have to have a lot of power and vehicle weight matters, but not as much as aerodynamics in some respects. So you kind of have to balance, like for instance, the aerodynamics on this car weigh over 75 pounds, but you know, it's still faster with the extra 75 pounds than it would be without it. So you're kind of this blend between the quarter mile and top speed racing, where weight isn't at all a problem. It's all about horsepower and drag. So it's a unique distance to try to race in. You know, we're still very much accelerating at the finish, so weight and stuff is important, but it's more just about brute power and drag.
I was going through brakes about every 6 months, about once a year at least, if you're doing quite a few half-mile events. And the front brakes on the car, you know, they run about $2,000 just for the front brakes. So the parachute's been a big thing, and it does, if you were to have a problem, you would at least get it deployed and it would straighten you out, and you may run off the end, but you wouldn't be going 200 miles an hour.
Brakes, yeah, ever since I did the parachute, the brakes are used a little less. I already knew how hard it would stop from like 180 in a car like this. I mean, they're upgraded Willwood brakes, but they're not that big. The fronts are Willwood 6-piston caliper. And because of the size tire I run, I can't fit a bigger brake under the front than what I have. And they work really good, but the parachutes, you pull the parachute, that makes life way easier. I use that every time now, because you don't have to destroy the brakes and don't want like warped and f***ed up rotors every time I go out.
The parachute at 200 miles an hour is about the same stopping force as all 4 brakes. We pull the chute and then we feed the brakes in nice and strong at the end to get down to speed. But it's a full drag race package. The reason why we do that is rotational inertia in the half mile is extremely important. You know, basically there's so much drag at the top end of the track, we're trying to just get all that power to the tarmac so we're not bleeding it off.
My name is Juan Ibarra, and I got a 2003 Chrysler PT Cruiser GT. It's a unique vehicle. Every time I go to events, like the only one. You know, I have a Corvette ZR1 at home, and I can bring it out here, and I can have fun and go faster. But you know, Corvettes are a dime a dozen. There's like a million of them here. PT Cruiser, every time I go, I'm the only one. Every time. It's just fun. You know, it's just different. It's fun. Nobody expects it. You either hate it or you love it. It's PT Cruiser, that's all I get. I never get kind of guys like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. No, it's either that thing's a pile of shit, or I get, oh man, I love it. That's it. That's just, there is no middle ground. It's like, you love it or hate it. I'm cutting the exhaust off, cut a little weight, get a little more flow on the backside of the turbo. Hopefully it'll help me. I'm having boost issues. I can't build boost. It's like the air out here is hot or something. You basically need a lot of power once you get beyond that quarter mile mark. You know, just people think you get out there in the quarter mile and yeah, you're hauling ass, but you hit the wall, and you need to be able to up the boost or do whatever you got to do to pick up more power and keep building more and more power as you get towards the end, because otherwise you just stop. You hit the wall and that's it. So that's basically what you need. You need a lot of power. Simple it out.
Half mile is kind of unique because, you know, quarter mile drag racing is almost all about the lightest vehicle weight possible and the highest amount of power. The half mile kind of blends the two, where you have to have a lot of power and vehicle weight matters, but not as much as aerodynamics in some respects.
You're looking for a lot of traction in the earlier gears in quarter mile. I mean, you're still gonna want it here too. I mean, I personally feel like the smaller the tire you can run and make the most power, the more aerodynamic it's always gonna be. So if you have a huge wide tire, I mean, front wheel drive car at least, you have a huge wide tire, think of it like opening an umbrella and going forward versus closing it. It's a much thinner, it's a much less surface area. Problem with that is it's also harder to hook. And slicks don't work on this kind of road, so airports, don't try and put a slick on there, you'll spin more.
Traction is obviously one of those things where all-wheel drive is a massive advantage in this type of racing. You know, the all-wheel drive record's 20-some miles an hour faster than the two-wheel drive, and it's not that the two-wheel drive car makes less power, it's just this is a completely unprepped surface. So, you know, 198 miles an hour is fast, but some Subarus trap almost 180 in the quarter mile. But it's not the same thing because we're doing it on a DOT radial, and it's like basically trying to do it on a 2 city blocks, you know, unprepped. So it's a whole different animal. The car's geared differently and stuff to make use of the fact that we don't have a lot of grip. So first gear does 62 miles an hour in this car. That way we can spread the torque out over the longest distance so we don't spin as much.